Hi there guys, my name is Zach and amongst other things I'm a reenactor and a jouster, and today I am going to be answering 5 questions that I often get asked. Now the previous 2 videos I kind of themed them. This is kind of a bit of a mishmash video with some other questions that I often get asked. If you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments down below, and without further ado, let's get on with it. Question number 1 is, can you stand up when you are knocked over in full plate? The simple answer is yes. Let's go for a slightly longer answer because we want a longer video for the YouTubes. Okay, so it kind of depends why you've fallen off. If you have fallen off because you've been badly injured already, then yes, you can very easily stand up. The weight of the armour is not a problem. If you have fallen over because someone has whacked you in the head and concussed you through your sallet, then that's a different thing. The armour itself should not pose any impediment to you getting up. Now, there would be an exception to this rule. That would be if someone had damaged the armour in a way that meant it was difficult for you to move. So for example, if a blow had smashed the articulation on the knee, that would make it difficult to get up. If for some reason the points that are holding your a piece of armour in place have broken, that might make it difficult to get up. But the weight of the armour itself is not going to stop you from getting back up. Okay, question number 2. Does it hurt when you get hit by a lance? Very often we actually get this at events, people saying, does it hurt when you get hit by a joust? Because not everyone knows that a joust is the sport and the lance is the weapon. Anyway, does it hurt when you get hit by a lance? It very much depends on where you get hit. It very much depends on the armour, how you get hit and things like that. Now, the jousting that I do, we use solid hardwood lances with balsa ends, which are designed to fragment. The balsa tends not to hurt unless it's a really solid piece, which can happen. But then sometimes you'll get ferruled, which is where the balsa basically disintegrates without the lance end changing direction, and then you get hit by the hardwood lance. If that smacks you hard in the right place, maybe the chin or something like that, and you impact on the inside of your helmet, then yes, that can hurt quite a lot. Another way that you can get quite badly hurt is by your own lance. That would be if you have a shaped lance. Some jousters, myself included, use shaped lances which give for a better grip. But if that ferrules on your opponent, it can rock backwards, and if you haven't gripped it correctly underneath your arm, that can pull back on your thumb, and several jousters have received broken hands as a result of their own lance impacting backwards on their thumb. Another way that you can get hit that can hurt quite a lot is by a barricade. A barricade, it can be called other things as well, sometimes called a sweep, is where the lances impact but not point onto the shield. So instead of the point of the lance hitting the shield, you instead get clotheslined by the length of the lance. And that can be quite painful as well, because the lance is not going to break if it impacts like that. So yeah, it depends. Most of these questions are going to be it depends, but hopefully that gives you some idea of the different kind of impacts and how that can affect things. Okay, question number 3 is very much linked to the previous question. I wasn't sure whether or not what order to put these ones in. Question number 3 is, how are the lances made? Now, this depends on what type of jousting you're doing. That would have changed in the 15th century throughout the medieval period, especially the later medieval period, to be honest, as well. In the early medieval period, people are basically just using war weapons at tournaments. Tournaments are basically just war, but you're trying not to kill your opponents. You're just trying to knock them out and capture them. Okay. By the late medieval period, jousting has become a lot more of a sport, and there's kind of two general ideas of jousts that you can have, but they tend to be more of a spectrum with different variations in between rather than specific types of jousting. So what you've got is you've got jousts of war and jousts of peace. Jousts of war are ones that use war armour and war lances. So these are solid, usually pine, sometimes ash, often with just a normal sharp tip to them. You would be wearing a shield usually for these. Those are generally considered the most dangerous, and so therefore the most they carry the most prestige if you're doing a joust of war. A joust of peace is one where you use specific sporting equipment. Now this can include things like a coronal on the end of the lance, so that splits, instead of having one point on the end of the lance, it splits it to have either 3 or 4, and that spreads the impact over multiple points, which means that the impact isn't going to penetrate as deeply. It is also, the coronal is much wider, so if it hits in the visor slit, it can't actually go through. So that's another benefit to using a coronal. They also use specific jousting armours for these, things like the frogmouth helmets that you might see in a museum. These are specific jousting armours, and they're designed for these jousts of peace. Now, like I said, there's no codified laws to this, so you've got everything happening in between. Sometimes you have jousts of war using helmets designed specifically for jousting. Sometimes you have jousts of peace where they're using the full joust of peace armor, but they're using a single point lance. So there's no central rule book that codifies it. It's up to each individual person who puts on a joust as to what he's going to set as the rules. Now, nowadays there are different types of jousting as well, and it's kind of a bit more codified, not quite as much as you'd expect from a modern sport though. What you got is you've got show jousting, which is kind of a stunt show where extremely good riders do tricks, and it's all based around a medieval theme. Okay, they know who's going to win, so it's not so much a sport as it is a display piece. Then you've got balsa jousting or breakable tip jousting. Goes by various different names in different parts of the world. Sometimes it's with a balsa tip to the lance, sometimes it's with a pine tip to the lance, but they tend to be weakened. So the end, kind of 24 inches of the lance, is a weakened, softer wood than the main part of the lance. What this means is it will break with less force, and so that means you don't need a metal coronal on the end in order to get a good break. Now that some people think that is safer, some people say that it's not as safe because it means that the lance can sometimes break into smaller pieces. It's really kind of depends who you ask, because the next one is solid lance jousting. Solid lance jousting is also sometimes called historical solids, and historical solids uses basically equipment just as I described in the previous section for joust of war and joust of peace, and different individuals will use different variations on that for their jousts when they organise them. The last one that I'm aware of, and there may be more, if you know some more, then you can write them in the comments down below, is the American Grand Guard style of jousting. Now, I've only really seen this happen in America. That's why I call it American. There might be a few places around the world that do it as well. But this is a style of jousting that uses generally a full solid lance, kind of like a dowel, and instead of using a shield, they use a 16th century thing called a grand guard, which has got a grid on it. And when the lance impacts on that, it catches really strongly without having to have a big coronel on the end. And that can really create some big impacts and can cause people kind of to slingshot out of the saddle. It can be very, very impressive. So that's the fourth one that I'm aware of. So as you can see, lances can be made in lots of different ways, and it depends on what you're trying to do as to what kind of lance you're going to be using. Okay, question number 4 is, what is your favourite medieval weapon? This is tricky. There are a lot of different types of medieval weapon. I can only really say the one that I really want to get next is a horseman's axe. Now, in the accounts of Richard III dying at the Battle of Bosworth, it says that he fought on foot with an axe as he was killed. And a lot of people kind of think, well, that doesn't seem right. Now, there is a 16th century horseman's axe, so I'd love to get that replicated and use that on horseback and experiment using it both on horseback and on foot, because that's the kind of thing that I think it's talking about there. You know, when you're talking about 1485, you're really not far off the 16th century. So I think something like that is the kind of thing that he would have used, and so that's what I'm really excited about getting in the future and trying out next. But you know, as a jouster, you've got to say a lance. Lances and spears are just really, really useful, and they've been used since people first invented fighting, basically, all the way through history, because they're so useful. They're cheap to make, they're cheap to fix, easy to fix when they break. They keep someone at a distance. If you combine it with a horse, they give you huge amounts of power. So yeah, that's what I go with. And question number 5, the last one for today, is how long does it take you to put your armour on? Shortest answer is a lot longer than it takes to take it off. It really does depend. It depends on how you're setting it up. It depends on who's helping you put it on. Like I've said before, it is extremely difficult to put on medieval armour once you get above the waist. You need someone to help you generally. Especially if you're going to be wearing it for a long time. If you need to wear it for anything longer than half an hour, you really need it to go on correctly in exactly the right way. Otherwise, you are going to be in a lot of pain, because steel does not bend in the same way that our bodies do. So, yeah, I'd say if I was putting it on properly and taking my time so that it was on nicely and someone was helping me that knew my armour, it would take 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And that's, you know, really kind of paying attention to it. I think with someone who really knew my armour, I think we could do it in 15. There's certain things that you can do at the same time as each other. So, for example, putting on your mail standard whilst someone else is putting on your male skirt and things like that. So there's things that you can do to speed it up, but I would aim to take 20 minutes to 30 minutes just to make sure that it's all fine, because it does tend to slide down a little bit. Most of it is tied to you or buckled to you, but there will be some slippage, so you kind of want to know before you go into an event, whether that's a reenactment battle or a joust, what it feels like once it's slipped. You know, it doesn't seem like much, but 5 millimeters can really make a difference between an armour being comfortable and absolute agony. Okay, there we go. Those are my 5 questions for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please do hit the like button. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I love all of the comments that I've been getting. If you've got any more questions, please do leave them below. I would love to hear them, and I would love to do some more videos like this in the future. Thank you very much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.